everybody. I am so excited to have John Gallagher here. One big reason why is because John is the #1 nicest person on planet Earth.
Oh, thank you.
And I met John, as we were just saying, back when you were self-publishing Buzzboy back then.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
And this was when I was working at Diamond Comics, and then we've stayed in touch. And when did you get the book deal with Random House?
That would have been the end of 2018, I think.
Okay, so it's 2 years after you first got the
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I was thinking like, oh, I'll sign this and then I'll start work and then it'll come out in a year. And they were like, yeah, that doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And then so we reconnected at ALA was it a year ago?
Yes. I can't, it actually goes before the book. Yeah. Before the book deal kicked in. And I might have reached out to you for some advice, or we bumped into each other. And you had started, I don't think it was being called Janico at that time.
Yeah, I was just freelance editing. Yeah.
Right. And you were taking some Facebook. Yeah. So I give a lot of credit to you because you helped me cut through a lot of the weeds, because as a lot of creators may deal with, my problem wasn't that I didn't have any ideas. My problem was I had too many freaking ideas. And as my wife always says, she's like, oh yeah, you need another project. And so I had 4 different book ideas. One was, and I had worked on them. I had done 20 pages of a new, like I've been self-publishing a book called Buzzboy about a teen sidekick who never grew up for the last 20 some years. I had drawn 23 pages of that. And I had an idea for some books that I'd developed with my kids, and I just couldn't figure out where to go. And I believe, Janna, I threw this into your chat and you just said, if you were gonna, there's 2 ways you phrased it, but one was like, if you were gonna die in a year and this was gonna be your legacy, which of these projects would you choose? And I'm like, oh, Max Meow. And it really was, it was very much because at that point I had developed it enough, and my son Will, who was 10 at the time, he was all in with me on this. He helped create the name, a lot of the character stuff, and I kind of, he's since moved on, but a lot of that, it was selfish, because then I got to spend more time with him, and it, because I was so excited about it, it really flowed, and I think that showed.
Oh, okay. So tell us, we'll just jump right in then.
Yeah.
Tell us about how you pitched it. Like, did you first, was Judy already your agent?
No. So I've known Judy for over a decade. She was introduced to me by Jim Gownley, who does Amelia Rules and has a great new book coming out next month. And Judy made a point of saying, I'm not, several times to me and others, I'm not your agent until I sell something for you. And that was both, I like to think of it as both like, I've got to work for this, but also a warning. Don't throw around my name. And I think that's really fair. And so Judy and I had known each other, and she spent a lot of time trying to help sell some different things that I had been pitching. And just, especially because I was doing things that were more in the traditional comic space. I like to say my stuff was too indie and kid-friendly for mainstream comics, what we call mainstream comics, and too mainstream for Scholastic. And I think they believed wrongly that Marvel and DC were doing just great with superheroes. But I disagreed, because when I was growing up, superheroes could be picked up by any kid, and they had kind of started catering to this older market that wasn't going to be, it's just simple economics. And I had to get past the fact that I wanted to do superhero books and realize that there was a different way to do this. So anyway, Judy, I actually called up, so I came up with the idea for Max Meow, I was teaching an after-school comics class to elementary school kids. And you know, when you teach these classes, half the kids are like, give me a pencil and a paper and leave me alone. They're going to draw. You don't need to help them except to walk around and go, hey, what's that? Pretty good. The other half were terrified. They wanted to draw comics. They didn't know how to do it. They didn't even want to put a pencil on a paper for a single line. So I gathered them around and I said, we're going to create a comic together. And we had all these 11 by 17 sheets with just one panel per page. And I was like, okay, what books do you like? They threw out Smile, Captain Underpants, Dogman. I mean, this is right when Dogman had just started to really take off. And someone's like, Dogman. And I'm like, okay, but there's already a dog comic. Let's do a cat. And then we came up, you know, someone threw out, there's a scientist, there's a lightning bolt, there's a robot. And I kind of drew I drew a cover, and we called him Captain Cat at the time. I did some pencils, I did some inks. Kids, they just jumped around and did different things, because not every kid's an artist, not every kid's a writer, and this let them feel good about what they were good at. And the next week I came back thinking I was teaching a different class, and that same group was sitting there ready to work on the next part of Captain Cat. And I started drawing this and didn't care if it was going to get picked up by anybody. I had self-published for years, and my son Will got really excited about it. But then I saw an article in Publishers Weekly, which I was interested enough that I was reading Publishers Weekly, and just saw that there had been a 3 million print run announced for Dogman. And I got a little cocky, and I think in a good way. And I sent an email out to Judy and said, hey, I have this book that's kind of in the Dogman vein. If you think anyone would be interested in that, let's talk. And Judy, who has always been great and supportive, and the best part about her is completely honest. Like when something I come up with an idea that isn't going to work, she's going to like, you know, that's not going to work. No one wants that, or no one wants that right now. And she called me and said, I think this is interesting. I like this and I don't like that. And so basically, once we talked it through, she discussed, you know, what the market was, that there was interest in this type of book, but that it had to be prepared a certain way, because different editors look at things different ways. So Judy sort of laid out for me, these are the things that I need you to do. And they included creating a Word file, essentially creating a one-page description of what Max Meow is. And next, who I am, like an author bio. And she's like, play up your education. I'd been an art teacher for 3 years. I've been a graphic designer for 25. And most recently, I'm the art director for Ranger magazine. So I had like some clout in kind of the education space. And she pointed out to me that does help. And we put together a series of Word docs that I believe then she presented in slightly different ways to different people based upon what their interests were. And that included an overview and character bios. And then one of the things that was really helpful to me was write out, you know, think of this as a 3-book series. Write out the Amazon paragraph. When you go to Amazon, there's a paragraph there that has to sell you. Write that out. And just doing that made me ask myself questions that I hadn't asked myself yet. So sorry for the long-winded answer.
Oh, that is super awesome. And I just want to follow up with everybody here. Does anybody have any specific other questions about the pitch process? Because you gave such a detailed picture of what you did. Anybody, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat. Yes. Danny?
Yes. When you're talking about making this one-page description of this Amazon description, if you're thinking about it as a 3-book series, how do you process all of the information that you're trying to get down into one condensed area?
Right. Well, that's a good question. And that an easy mistake to make is to try to fit everything in there. And in this case, I had to write the description. And if you read an Amazon description, if you read the one of, I actually didn't write the one that ended up being on Amazon because they have people who were better at that than me. I wrote it and I didn't give anything away. But then later, once there was enough interest, I wrote up a detailed description of what happens in each book. So the Amazon thing is just sort of just, it's, what is it? There, it's almost like a little
Like
bit more than an elevator pitch.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I had to kind of go in and write what the ideas were. And at that point, I had no idea what my themes were going to be. You know, there has to be some point to your story, I think. And, but I kind of, by writing the character bios, I was able to start defining them, and some of the problems that were going to pop up between the characters started to present themselves.
So something you just said, I want to follow up about. So did you and Judy do like a soft pitch initially, where you talked to certain editors and showed them, and then once people were interested, then you went back and did a more detailed proposal?
You know, I think Judy was doing a soft pitch, and she might correct me. She kind of kept me oblivious to some of it, which is good, because one of the mistakes that I and other self-publishers and creators have made is we get so used to doing everything that we don't listen to anybody, or we just charge on through. And so she was kind of, I believe she was discussing with people, I've got this thing, you know, with John, and, you know, I've talked to you about him before, and I think this is good. You know, I imagine it was like that. And then she was asking me for the different elements that I think she put together then in like an email.
Okay.
Or, you know, she may have just forwarded my Word documents. I kind of, you know, let her handle that. And what I also did, and this is the kind of thing that only experience can teach, is I listened to her. And Judy has been giving me advice or suggestions for years. And just to show you, this is Buzzboy. And this is Max Meow, of course. Buzzboy, you know, it was made kind of clear to me that it was going to be really hard to do a superhero, but I kind of kept going, and it was hard to let go of that. Then I did something called Roboy Red with my friend Rich Faber, and about a runaway robot, but it still had a very much superhero feel. And it was only when I could kind of humble myself and say, because, you know, a lot of it was, well, I know what I want to do. And it is a balance of staying true to yourself, but also adjusting to what your audience is. And as Judy reminded me, she's like, you know, if you get a deal, if you do this, that's going to open the door. It'll make it that much easier to do that thing that maybe you can't get done right now.
That is so true. Yeah, sometimes you have to have the gateway project that then allows you to do something else. Yeah, totally. So actually, I want to ask a question, because in the chat, David Rickard said, I'm a teacher as well. What was important about that background that allowed you to leverage it as a graphic novelist?
You know, it's really interesting because, you know, people who are in the publishing industry, they're not necessarily sitting there with students, although they seem to have some great insight, and many are parents. And so it seems to me that it is both. They understand that you might understand kids, and if you've been a teacher, you have had the challenge of, how do I get a complex idea across in a simple way, you know, or in a way that's engaging. And that's really what we do as you know, as authors, is we're trying to get some ideas across, but not hit them over the head with it. And we've all had those teachers in high school or middle school or elementary school that you're like, I get it. So I think there's a respect for educators. I think there's also the case of, from a marketing standpoint, I think that is a real good hook for librarians and teachers to hear, oh, John's been an educator. Well, you know what? They want to give that educator a little bit, a little bit of help. When I personally am like at a dinner party, when we used to have those, if I meet a teacher, I get a little tongue-tied, or not tongue-tied, but I grew up in a family where you just really respected teachers. And I think that carries through and helps marketing make it that much easier to sell a book.
Cool. All right, so I want to get back to the whole pitching thing, because I know everybody here is really interested in that.
Sure.
So did you get multiple offers, or were you just dealing with Random House?
Well, the book was sent out to 5 different publishing houses.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, and some of this I know, and some I'm like privy to. A couple just outwardly rejected it. There was a hard pass. They didn't want to do it. We chose not to pitch it to Scholastic because they had Dogman. Even though I'm thankful that the reviewers are not calling it, like, it's not Dogman. I would say this is as comparable to, it's just because Dogman's so big, but it's comparable to like Spider-Man and Superman. They're both superheroes, but I don't think kids are picking up that it's, that it's one is a duplicate of the other. And I'm really happy about that. But at that point, it was easy for people to interpret it like that. So there were going to be bids, and Random House made a preemptive bid.
Okay.
So it had been discussed and shown to 5 different houses. A couple had already passed. I think one had their own cat book that is so far from what Max Meow is, but they were furious at me. They were mad at me. And I've since gone. I had no idea this book existed. I've since gone and looked at it, and I'm like, I don't know where they got the idea. But then I talked to a couple publishers, the editors that were interested, and Judy was on the call and sort of guided through the call, and then had essentially said to them, our bidding will be on Wednesday. Bids should be in by 5:00. And I got a call back the next day. Random House is very interested. They would like to make a preemptive bid, which means that they're going to make an offer, so we take it off the table. And I was really excited about working with my editor, Shayna Corey. She had worked on Baby Mouse. She worked with Judd Winnick on Hilo. And I felt like just the fun of the books at Random House Children's Books. This wasn't Random House Graphic, but Random House Children's Books was just a good match for me. So we decided to stick with them, or go with them, and not ride it out for an auction.
Okay, cool. So now you mentioned another one of my favorite people, Shayna Corey, your editor. So tell me a little bit about what it's been like working with her as an editor. So because you've been a self-publisher for so long, and now you're working with a very experienced children's book editor who's been in the field forever, and she's also an author. So what has that been like?
Yes, well, and I didn't know that Shayna was an author when I started working with her, and have since discovered that she has written a bunch of books that are like early reader books, but they are always about great characters. Like, she has a little golden book coming out in, I think, February or March about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I'm just so sad that Justice Ginsburg didn't get to live to see this, because I think that would have been Sheena's greatest. I don't know if she's ever met her, but that would have been her greatest day of her life. And but I'll say that from the very first call, the enthusiasm that I felt from Shayna was just so exciting. Like, she made me want to get off the phone and go draw more, just so I could get the book done. And that has kind of carried through. Like, I would say that, Shayna as an editor is as much of a cheerleader she makes sure that I'm following a path. She's very complimentary and encouraging, and I send her and she also had worked with comics before, which a lot of editors, that's new for them. And I just said to her, I don't think I can write a script. Like, I don't think I can write a full script and tell you what's going to happen. I usually do thumbnails, and then I'll write a script if I have to. And she's like, you know what, just do thumbnails and write the dialogue in. I'll take a look at it. We'll see if it works. So I essentially sent her a PDF that looks like a little more than stick figures and has the dialogue written in. And I get a lot of comments coming back, like a labeled with like LOL or lol. My kids yell at me if I say LOL anymore. Lol. And, but then she will bring up things like, Janna, you might remember more. It's when I say the same phrase 2 times in a row on the same page. She's just catching the things that I'm too busy. I'm just pushing through to get the story done. And but she also noticed that because of my years of drawing comics on my own, and self-publishing, that I had a pretty good grip on the story structure. So there's a lot of times where she's just letting me run. And then once that has happened, we'll do a second pass where I go in and make corrections and edits. And she also points out things that I don't even think of as being problems, partially because, I'm a middle-aged white man, and it's a very sensitive market out there. And most of my inspiration for humor is Chuck Jones, Bugs Bunny cartoons. So, and I have to admit, not all of them are acceptable or even were 20 years ago. So for the wide audiences.
So let's talk a little bit about the production, because or the publication timeline, because like you said, when you first signed the deal, you're like, yay, in 1 year my book's gonna come out, and then you realize, oh no, it's not. So tell me, because I assume that you guys front loaded some books so that you can have them coming out sort of. So the first book came out when? This month?
October 6th.
This month, yeah. Right. And then the second book is going to come out when?
The second book, well, that was one of the attractions of Max Meow, is I was prepared and believed I could follow a schedule and have it coming out every 6 months. And
right, that's like that. Okay.
Right. And so the next one comes out April 6th, and then the one after that is coming out. There's 3 books in the series right now. It's coming out October 7th next year. Okay. So did I front load? Well, book 2 is done. And it's been done for a while. It's been done for a couple months. Book 3, I have about 100 pages left to ink and color. And that'll all be done. So it is finalized a full year ahead, which again was alien to me, because as a self-publisher, when it was especially comics, I get it done, I send it to the printer, in 2 weeks I've got a comic book. Hey kids. And it's so exciting, but they have to they're investing a lot in me and in all the people working on it. So they spend a lot of time pre-selling it in a sense, before it goes out. And that was, I knew that there was an advance amount of time. I just didn't realize it really was 2 years from completion.
Yeah. So Allison just said, how long does each book take you to write and draw and ink?
Well, I really am following the first book we probably spent 9 months to get right. But I, especially because I work for a periodical with Ranger Rick magazine, I had learned enough about production to figure out a couple things, which is how quickly I have to get the book done, the best process to speed it up or keep it going, which means the things I was bad at, I brought in people to help, assistants to help, which is like the color. Like, I am great with the story. I love to ink. I had to come up with a style I could do quickly enough. And I mean, when I started Buzzboy, I drew very much compared to Batman the Animated Series that some people may know. I kind of already drew like that, but I had to go with a simpler style for Max Meow. And it wasn't like I dumbed it down. I have spent the last decade kind of trying to simplify and going and looking at the masters of simplification like Charles Schultz and Bill Watterson, and just looking at what it is that makes these books so accessible. So in a sense, the faster I draw this book, the more kids seem to respond to the art style, and I think they're feeling that frenetic, that energy of when I draw it.
How many pages is each book?
Each book is it's 224 pages of story, and that's full color. It's a lot. And when I signed the contract, I'll be really honest, when we were first talking about this and agreed to the deal, it was 150 pages. But they came back to me and said, we really have to make this, we want this to be comparable to the books that are selling right now. And that meant, so we moved it up to 200 to 224 pages. And then I've got back matter, which is like how to draw Max. And there's things like, the author pages and things like that. But part of the attraction to Random House and the agreement was that this was coming out as a hardcover book, and it would be priced comparable to books like Dogman and Hilo and things. So it's $12.99, whereas a lot of similar books are selling for $17.99 to $21.99. So yeah, it's a lot of pages, and there was a time when I was finishing book one, I was inking book two, and I was laying out book three, and those days were very tense, and Shayna knew that I was tense, and she was like, "I'm so sorry, but you still got to get it done." And
oh my gosh! So how did you do it?
I have a very understanding family. They all knew that this has been my dream since I was 5 years old. Like, since I was 5, I've said I'm going to be a comic book artist. I studied graphic design, but that was to pay the bills while I got ready to be a comic book artist. And now that I have 3 kids and a family and a home, I haven't quit my job either as art director for Ranger Rick, but luckily I have flexibility with my company. And I have to say that the COVID quarantine has helped my production, because it's taken an hour and a half out of my commute time.
Oh, yeah.
That is now used for art.
Right.
But there have been many weekends, many late nights where, can you come to the in-laws? No, I can't, and that's just the sacrifice that we have all had to make. And I don't always feel good about that. I think that's part of the reason why a lot of my comics, I've worked with my kids in some degree. And my son, Will, who's 12 now, or just turned 13, he still is my graphic novel reviewer. He's read Max. He's given me, he helped me develop the first 70 pages. And he actually saved me a huge embarrassment, because I had plotted out the first 3 books, and the second book, and you have to remember, this is before all the Dogman books have come out. And I don't know how familiar everybody is, but I had this whole idea about it, animal-based superhero coming out of retirement, but now he's grim and gritty, and it's very much was like Batman: The Dark Knight, which was done by Frank Miller, but it was all going to be done very funny, and I was going to make it a dog, and I'm like, oh, I got the perfect name, the Bark Knight, and I thought I was a genius. No one will think of that. And Will happened to pick up the latest Dogman, and they were calling Dogman, when he becomes a superhero, the Bark Knight. And he's like, but the best part was, he goes, Dad, how did he rip you off? And I love that. But at the same time, like, if I didn't have Will reading that, I don't know if the editors are reading Dogman. It would have had to be adjusted, or it would have been very embarrassing. And what I said to Will was, whenever you see duplicates like that, I go, I'm pretty sure Dave Pilkey and I watched the same cartoons and read the same comic strips. And this is and he said, would he be mad at you? And I'm like, no, I think he would laugh about it. I hope that'd be my hope.
Oh my gosh. So can you tell me like when you were in the thick of the production, which maybe you still are right now, like what does your week look like? Do you draw before work and then do work and then draw after work, and how does it work?
It really varies. I would say that most likely well, there are plenty of weekends where I'm doing all my Ranger Rick work so I can work on the comic. The way we're set up is I have certain benchmarks I have to hand in by a certain time, the layouts, then we have to do a revision, and then that's considered the accepted first draft. Then I do essentially the inks and the colors all at the same time. And then, so I know what my deadlines are, and I kind of base it around that. So there are some weeks where 4 out of 5 days I'm working on Max Meow. And then there have been, and usually after that, once I hit a deadline, I may have a whole week where I'm just working on Ranger Rick, and then it's catching up on the weekend with that. So it really varies. And now it's even crazier because I have, two, well, a high schooler, a middle schooler, and a college student all going to school out of the house. And thankfully, they're all pretty self-sufficient right now. But I've taken over the dining room table. I'm right now in I don't know if you can really see, I have a diner booth that because when I will come down and draw at the diner booth, but it was getting so dark in the basement that I had to move where there was light. Sorry, I'm rambling about that. But so it really varies. I would say I usually have at least a 10-hour day, and at least half of that is Max Meow, and the other half is Ranger Rick. But it's hard because, blocks of time are so important. Mm-hmm. And so there have been days where I've started drawing thinking I was spending 4 hours, and it was like 4 p.m. now. It's been 8 hours, and I've missed 2 meetings. So that is one thing that I have to get better at, is because I have hyper focus. So it can be detrimental to me. And there have been times where it looks like I'm like, are they going to yell at me this week? Like, but they have been very supportive at Ranger Rick.
Yeah. So what was I going to ask? Oh, I remember when we were at ALA, when I saw you last, I remember you talking to me and telling me, like, how am I going to do this? I have a full-time job. I have this crazy production schedule, getting these books done. And sooner or later, I'm going to have to promote this book. Like, I have to get out there and make sure people know about it so that people buy it. So I want to ask you about that. I want to ask you what you devised in terms of plans for how to promote it. And then this whole pandemic happened, and I assume you had to kind of like completely change all your plans. So tell us how what happened.
Well, let me just assure you, yes, nothing has gone to plan. And in fact, I had already scheduled to take off from October 6th all the way through to this weekend, which was going to culminate in the Baltimore Comic-Con, which is a very family-friendly, kid-friendly show. They had already told me they were going to have a Max Meow Day on Sunday. I mean, that's all blown out of the water. Well, I'll tell you, I've been fortunate because Random House has had enough time, because, it's been 9 months essentially of them planning for how to do school events, how to do library events, and the librarians in the schools now have it down. So I'm kind of going from the backwards on. So right now I can do anywhere from 1 to 4 school visits or library visits a day. It started out slow, and now I've sort of hit a fever pitch, which I'm excited. And the schools are finally deep enough in that they're willing to have someone do an appearance. The plan was, though, is that I would be almost completely done with book 3 by October 6th. And I was told, you're not going to get any work done for October. So please have as much done as possible. What I haven't discussed is that we had put out an arc for Max Meow, and for multiple reasons, we decided to change a bunch of artwork and colors, which can happen. I mean, usually not at that stage, but it was important to me and to everybody that we do this. So we ended up going back to Max Meow 1 while I should have been working on 2 and revising about, not redrawing, but revising at least half of the pages. And that really messed me up. So then I had to really push to get book 2 done. And then I've got, now book 3 seems easy because I'm just working on book 3 right now. But they kept saying marketing, you know, we're going to handle marketing. It was, I met with the marketing team. They actually had a big Zoom call in August, at the beginning of August, and said, we're going to do this. We're going to get you to these events. We're going to do book shows. We're going to have school events. And then I met each person. There's a social network person. There's, and they've all were super nice and they're super excited because this is, they love books. So it's so cool when you meet these other people who love what you're doing and there's such respect. And then they all said, look, we're in this for the long game, John. So if we shut down the country, we're just going to push this down to April. You know, we'll get some of this stuff done now. So when it became obvious that none of this was going to happen, I was really disappointed. And I thought, I guess they're not going to do anything. And then almost exactly a month before my book came out, the publicist at Random House named Chris Cam contacted me, and it was like 30 emails. Like, I'm lining you up for this and this and this. Can you do this? And, you know, I have a lot more flexibility. So the answer has been yes for everything.
So wait, so you had the meeting with the marketing team in August of last year?
No, of 2020.
Oh, 2020. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so book 1 was already done. I was working on mostly done with book 2, and book 3 was getting underway. And they set up a meeting, and it was very nice. And even, you know, like the vice president of that area, she was part of it. My editor, I have an art director who's sort of dedicated to Max Meow and other projects. And she's actually helped with the lettering. I will create the word balloons, but she's laying the text in InDesign, which is not the way that I've done it traditionally, but down the road, this will make it easier if and when there are translations for Max Meow. So.
Cool. Wow. Let's see. Oh, there's a question from Janelle. What about authors only? Any suggestions for how they could get into the graphic novel market if all they have to submit is a script? I feel like I definitely should do a whole Zoom call just on that topic because it comes up over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that I think from the art to the author, but there have been some incredible books that have been done with authors. And I think, you know, what I keep hearing is for the pitch, you almost need to find a partner to partner with the art. I don't know that I could really answer that question, but I do know many great comics writers. And that's actually very traditional in the DC and Marvel comics world. In fact, I think in DC comics, it's really hard to be a writer artist. I knew one guy, he had to use a pseudonym for his writer name to do an issue of the Justice Society. And it's the only case I've ever heard of that. I think if you have to have like your own corporation.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's like two parallel universes. They're so different.
Yeah.
So different. Yeah. So David Rickard asks, did you hire a colorist or was one assigned to you by Random House?
Well, it's funny because one thing the publishers seem to have learned is that that's one place they can interject. You need to get some help because there are some creators that want to do everything and others that are happy to share the wealth. And that was one thing that was said to me is, we think that it'll really help if you get a colorist. And I had the option of having them help me find a colorist. I decided to do kind of a hybrid. For the book 1, I had a team of 3 color flatters. So they were just dropping in flat color. As we progressed, they would add a little bit of shading, and then I go into every single page and adjust it. They're putting the accurate colors in, and then in book 2, I sort of had to change half the team because colorists kind of float around depending on what their work schedule is. So I kind of had an entire turnover of my colorist team. And so that's been the toughest part, because book 2, the biggest problems we had were with consistency. And ultimately that was my fault, because I had not done a good enough job of having character sheets for every character. Because again, I'm so used to doing it myself. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll fix it all. And then I was sending it off to Random House, and they're like, the orange and Max is different on these pages. So what I did was I hired Random House, gave me my contract for my advances, and and Judy negotiated a separate fee that isn't considered part of my advance that goes towards the colorist. And in my case, for a 240-page book, it was maybe not as much as would cover a colorist, but it's worked out for me. I think it all depends on what colors you get, and I've seen varying successes for that.
So another thing I want to ask you about the promotion is the website, because your Max Meow website, it really pops. Did you design it yourself?
Actually, the Max Meow website I did, and part of my graphic design skill, like I graduated from college in the 90s, and it was all print design. And then the web kicked off, and one of my big advantages was that I was someone who always said, if someone asked, can you do this? I'd be like, yeah, I'll give it a try. So I was creating websites very early on. Now, websites are completely different these days. This one was created in WordPress. So I had looked at all these author websites, and that's what I'll often do. The best ones I could see, the ones that I thought would get people excited, were Dave Pilkey's, very playful. Judy Moody, is that Heather McDonald?
Oh, no.
Wait, I'm sorry.
I blanked on the author's name as well.
Okay, so the Judy Moody website.
I'm sure somebody here knows. Put it in the chat.
Yes.
Megan McDonald.
Yes, Megan. Yes.
Megan McDowell. Okay. I just wanted it to be, so I designed it with these very simple, bright blocks of color. And the idea was that anywhere someone goes, they can click on something. But I had to adjust the website because in this case, I was reminded that kids weren't necessarily the ones going to this website. A lot of it was gatekeepers, which can be librarians, doing their research, teachers, parents. And so I had to adjust. So I went from having a big, sliders going by and these big blocks of color to I still have a big intro, but now it is praise for Max Meow. So there's a lot of editorial reviews. And then the book trailer that I created. And, that's one thing I did animation, web animation in Flash. Now it's called Animate. And that I've always had like an animation flair. And that was actually a big help for me as well, because I created a book trailer that when we were pitching we sent off to these people so they could sort of see the power of it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you can do that even if you're sliding panels back and forth in iMovie. I think that can sort of help people, like doing that. And it's just a 1-minute trailer. But if you look at a lot of the book trailers that are out there, that is, again, like Danny, you asked that question about the Amazon paragraph. If you can think of what would go in a trailer, that can really help sell your book.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So is there anybody who has any questions from everything that we've been talking about with John so far? You can, yeah, Danny?
Sorry. When you said that you can adjust from your colorists, I've never like adjusted from flats before. How would you say the process is?
Well, I don't know how you, and I know you and know you do your own art. So the way Max Meow is done is, uh, I start with flat colors being dropped in, like almost like it looks almost like a paint bucket app has been used, and it's funny because I color usually in Photoshop. They're using a program called Clip Studio, which is a comic based. Clip Studio is great for drawing. It's great. Um, and they basically were dropping in, they were creating separate layers. So there's the black and white layer, and then there's a layer underneath that is color. So they're just dropping in flat blocks of color everywhere. And then what I'll do is I'll go in and I will select those blocks and add gradients or shading. It's very much like they've dropped in flat paint, and I just go in and add a little more, shading and, um, it's kind of hard to see, but there's just a little bit of shading to Max. I try not to make it too blatant. And like you'll see the blue on the white. So a
Yeah.
lot of that is I was given a very flat piece of artwork, almost like animation on, and then I go in and add just a little bit of shading to that.
Okay,
And
that makes sense.
That speeds the process up for me because I'm really bad when it comes to consistency, when it comes to things I'm not interested in. And color is not as exciting to me as telling the story. And I also, having worked as a designer, it's very normal for me to work in a team. And I know that's not easy for every creator, but for me, I had a roommate after college, and he worked for an engineering company and I was doing graphic design. I never had so much fun as when we were picking on each other or making each other laugh. And so I kind of enjoy the idea of having a team. And one thing that I've been lucky about is for book 2, my daughter, Katie, and her friend decided to help me flat colors because I was having other people were just disappearing on me. And that worked out really well because they were 2 fairly untrained artists. And it made it really great for me to say, do just this. Whereas I've had some very experienced artists come to help with color and they're like, yes, I'm going to do it my way. And they don't say that. They're very nice about it. But there is a power to working with people that are more raw in their talent.
That's super interesting.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the gang here? Yes, Mark.
How important was doing Buzzboy and being an independent producer for a while? How important was that to get you to doing Max Meow, to get that job and that contract?
Right. Well, I think it showed that I had the chops to do it. I was told that preceding me getting my contract, there's been some great creators that right out of college have gotten contracts in the last couple of years. Noelle Stevenson comes to mind. She did Nimona. She worked on Lumberjacks, and I've met her, and she has the greatest work ethic. What was happening was a bunch of college students were getting contracts right out of college and crashing and burning. And I know that there's some young artists here as well. And a lot of that is because that's a lot of pressure when you've been doing like a weekly web comic and suddenly have to do 200 pages in a year. And I mean, that's tough for anybody. So it really helped me to learn how to hit a deadline, or at least push through when things were hard. There's a big difference between I've probably drawn 1,000 pages of Buzzboy. So I knew that even though I had to do it in a quicker amount of time, I knew that I could get through 750 pages of Max Meow. So a lot of it was its confidence. The other part was they knew I was someone who had experience with printers, with all of this. And you don't have to have all that experience, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
Any other questions? Yes, Tintin?
Oh, okay. So how did you plan for three books all at once? Like, did you plan? Were you approved first for the first one, and then they said let's go ahead and make it a series? I think I missed that. I'm sorry if I did.
Oh yeah, I might have glossed over that. It was in this case, it was pitched as a 3-book series, and at least at that point, that was being, yeah, that is what the market really wanted, and I think it might still like that. Like I will say that being at comic book shows and selling, I've had kids come up to me and say, "Is this part of a series?" I won't read anything that isn't a series because as soon as they've read a book, they want to read the next one. So in this case, I pitched it as a 3-book series. And I've been, like I said, I've been doing Buzzboy for a long time, so that was not an alien idea for me. I see Buzzboy's adventures as being a continuing sort of thing. I do have some ideas for one-off books that would just be a single story, but this wasn't the case for that one. And it definitely was more attractive to Random House that it was a series.
So are you thinking there might be other Max Meow books? Like, are book 5 possible?
Yeah, Random House has expressed interest in that. I think that a lot of the reality is that Max Meow book 1, Cat Crusader, just came out, and they don't know what the response is. I mean, certainly the reviews have been good, and it's been doing really, the only sales indicator that I've seen has been where it falls on Amazon. And, I didn't make the New York Times bestseller list, darn. But just like thousands of other authors didn't make that list. So it's kind of forced me to, I just have to do my job. Like book sales for me is the same. Like as much as I want everybody to love me, I know that I can't make everybody go buy my book. Like this is where it's out of my hands, and that's hard. But at the same time, there's a nice thing because it reminds me to focus on what my job is, which is creating the books.
Yeah. So, Panayota, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, but you have your hand raised. Did you want to ask a question?
I saw someone, Alan. Alan, did you have a question?
Let's see. Okay, Alan, why don't you ask your question and then. Oh, Panayota
Okay.
said yes.
So I have a question about the writing, which is, as you went through doing all these 3 books, did you find yourself revising the writing because of the art? And if so, did you find yourself basically simplifying it and making it shorter?
For the first book, I think I laid out a total of 240 pages, which was 16 more pages than I was supposed to. So in that case, yes, and my editor, basically what she did with that book and has done with the following books has helped me with my pacing. And often, again, I said I'm really into the story. Sometimes I will make panels that she'll suggest, make this a full page panel, and maybe cut this part down. So it's all timing and sequence has been the big thing for me. Mm-hmm. But it's best for me just to lay it all out there. It's kind of like, writing that novel is sometimes you just have to, or I think about like reports in school. I would just write every idea I had and then go back and cut away at the excess. So, and in some cases, I like when I plot it out, I try to leave little spaces so I can add silliness, because there's certain things that, like, I know that Max is going to run from his apartment to Mindy's lab, but I kind of don't deal exactly with what's going to happen. And then I end up writing a sequence where he accidentally steps on the foot of a grumpy cat. And then that proceeds to add silliness later on when we meet the grumpy cat again. And so it's kind of it's sometimes it's very compact and I have to cut away, and other times it's very open and I kind of have to try to fill those voids. I guess it's almost like a garden, you know? It's like if something's overgrowing here, I have to pull those weeds.
Thank you.
That's a great metaphor.
Yeah,
All right.
What is it Stephen King refers to? I said this to my wife when I was talking about cutting a scene. I'm like, Stephen King says you have to kill your babies. And she's like, no, that's horrible. But in a way, it's true.
Yeah. All right. In the chat, we have the question. So you mentioned needing a launch project that would allow you to then move another project forward. So now with your success, you have a project that you are able to publish that you were not able to prior to this.
Not yet. And again, it's like there are varying levels of success because the book has been published. That is a success. Signing a deal with a major publisher was a success, but from every level of success, there was more work to be done. And what I see as an artistic success is I've gotten this book out and I think it looks good. And I've had kids tell me, or parents tell me their kids can't wait for the next book. That is a huge success. But whether it'll be a financial success, that's out of my control right now. And I know that there are different stories I'd love to tell, but I will say that whenever I'm working on a project, that's the thing that I love most in all the world. So right now, it's sort of like I feel like I could do at least 3 more Max Meow books after these 3. And I've already sent, even though it was unsolicited, I've already sent plots for 4 new Max Meow books to my editor, just so she knows that I am thinking this through. And also I leave kind of like cliffhangers. It's almost, I guess they're the after scene, like in Marvel movies. I have a scene that leads into the next book. So it's my editor who's going to have to say, like, we don't need that scene next time, because at book 3 ends, there's a semi cliffhanger going on there. So maybe I've tricked her. I don't know.
Oh, John, there's one other thing I really wanted to ask you about, which is community building as part of what you do. Because I think I relate to a lot because of that, because I also love community building. Right. So could you talk about Kids Love Comics, and do you feel like that in any way played a role in you eventually getting this book deal?
Oh yeah, I'd love to talk about Kids Love Comics. And, thankfully I know at least one person is on that deserves even more credit than me, is Harold Buchholz, because he and Jim Gownley, who I mentioned before, were the idea guys behind Kids Love Comics. And and so years ago, I met with them after a free comic book day, and they discussed this idea that we're going to start this group to remind people that kids love comics. Because this is like almost 20 years ago, and comics were still being called garbage by teachers or people. I will say that it was the older librarians that actually were embracing comics and graphic novels for reluctant readers. So we just decided to tell people kids love comics. And Jimmy and Harold came up with the idea. I had just been looking for something like this. And part of it was going to San Diego Comic-Con, getting a table, and having them put me next to Heavy Metal Magazine with a bikini-clad warrior princess, which isn't as fun as it sounds when you're trying to sell books to 8-year-olds. Because the parents don't tend not to let their 8-year-old, stand and watch. And so just the idea of getting together, it fit in with the same mentality as being part of a neighborhood group or a baseball team to me. And I just love teamwork, and I love the idea of everybody pitching in. And we each had our own strengths. Harold understands the printing and the industry. Jimmy with Amelia Rules was really one of the first graphic novel series that covered a lot of the same ground that we see today with Invisible Emmy and Smile, and just relationship books at a time when that wasn't being done. So there was just a lot of forward thinking and knowing that to get this to happen, we'd have to work together. And I guess I just really jumped into it and created the website for it and pitched an idea to Mark Nathan at the Baltimore Comic-Con saying, don't you think you should give us some free space and let us set up like 5 of us, which are kids, like put all the kid guys together. And they've continued. It hasn't stayed free, but it's discounted. We've had over 35 creators last year set up and selling their books. And it's like and then my friends Mark and Chris Mariano, who do their own books, they set up the classroom. We have an area that has teaching for kids. And what's great is I'll go do a presentation on, we design a bat cave, design your own bat cave. And I do this presentation and then I walk to my booth and usually 5 or 6 kids follow me and buy my book. So what we were trying to do was create an avenue to sell books and then also to make this thing grow and just show people that this is, show stores and people and librarians and everything, this is a good way to go. And I know that I was playing up the literacy angle because I know that that's one way. It's hard to call something junk if you say this, no, this helps with literacy. And thankfully now there's enough research to support that. And I always tell people, like when I go to talk to kids at schools, I point out, because people are always afraid, oh, they're only going to read graphic novels. I pointed out that I was known as the kid who read every book in my elementary school library. And that started with comics. And it was because I learned to love to read because of that. But, comics are real books. And I don't have, and my son last year, first week of 6th grade, he had 3 different teachers say that to the kids. Graphic novels are books. And I wasn't the one that had to go say it. So I love the idea of community. And a great example of community is I've known several people, including Raina Telgemeier, right when she got out of art school. I've known Dave Roman, who is working on science comics, I believe, and John Green. We all used to hang out at the Small Press Expo in Bethesda. John's had great success with his investigators. In fact, his Kitten Construction Company is one of my wife's favorite books, to the point where I'm kind of jealous. And John, some people would see him as me to him and him to me as a competitor, because we both do these silly animal books. And he and I are having none of that. Like, we are constantly supporting each other and sharing each other's links. And I made a joke that, because we had 3 cat books at Amazon and we were catching up to investigators, and I was saying like, yeah, the cats are all teaming up against you. And he made a joke like, oh, that's perfect. And then later on, Max Meow fell down the list and was surrounded by the 2 investigators books. And I was like, I guess that's fair. So anyway, I've never been one to think this is a competition that you need to crush the other guy. Helping people go further helps you, whether that's as a creator or as a person.
Totally. Any last questions? No? Well, John, okay, I do have one last question, unless somebody else, I don't want to.
I just wanted to add, this, Harold, that John really did bring a lot of heart and legs and design to Kids Love Comics, and really helped make it what it is even today, all these years later. He's really been the heart and soul of a lot of Kids Love Comics, and really grateful for his attitude toward community. It is very similar to what you're doing, Janna, and just really, really grateful that it exists, because we do need that fellow support. We are not competitors. We are actually trying to build something that can be so much greater.
Yeah, John, you inspired me.
Well, thank you. Well, you know what, like I said, you helped me. We help each other. And somebody said that to me once, like, we find each other. If you go looking for each other, you'll find each other, and don't turn away from that urge to help.
Yeah. So, okay, there is somebody who in the chat, Hanayota said, what would you say publishers are looking for now for graphic novels?
Wow, it's hard. There's such a variety, and I think it would depend upon the publisher. Like, I've certainly heard great things about Andrea Colvin, and I saw her on when you interviewed her, and what she's looking for, she would have no interest in anything that I'm doing. And so I think there are more people that want to do this than ever before, but there are more options for that. I've asked that question myself. You know, what are people looking for? How many pages do they want? Like, I want it to be a solid thing. And if there's anything I think people want, is they want to see characters with relationships, whether that's science fiction or fantasy or whatever. I think that is the connection that is bringing young people to enjoy these books. I don't think, I have to admit, I don't think art is as important as letting the story sort of breathe, but making the art appropriate is really important. And I think they don't want a story that's going to hit kids over the head with something. I hate those types of stories myself, although I've been guilty of almost writing them at times. So it's an easy trap to fall into. But I will say, I mean, I think you look at the relationship books or kids in school, that's something that's really good. I keep going back to something Andrea Colvin said, which is like, everything is a piece of fruit talking to another piece of fruit or something. And I was like, oh, come on. But the thing is, there's a place for that. There are so many different things. And I think it's just a matter of kind of looking, and then also asking yourself, what isn't being done yet? What story isn't being told, and thinking about how you're going to get that across. So with Max, I kind of followed similar, like, I have to admit, Buzz Boy is about a goofy superhero who has a friend who tries to talk him into not doing stupid things, but he's a superhero. He's going to smash through that wall. Max Meow is a cat superhero whose friend Mindy is constantly trying to teach him to have a plan. And I swear, in some ways, I'm writing Buzz Boy, but it's a cat now, and that works. So do look at what people are responding to. And there is a power to animals, And like I said, Charles Schulz, with 7 lines, he could draw such emotions. And so I think just tap into that and think about that as opposed to the surface. And then let me say thanks, Harold, for the nice things you said about Kids Love Comics. And if anybody's interested in seeing some of the presentations that we do, like, I'll say that Kids Love Comics did help. It worked the same way. The fact that I'm pushing literacy, and a big part of all my appearances is Kids Love Comics, that helped clout too, because I think publishers love it if they see someone that's a potential ambassador for what they're doing. And, I'm lucky to be at a place that really supports that. And there are just some great people that are speaking, and they're giving back to the community. And that's what we should all want to do. And if I made any mistake with Kids Love Comics, there were times I let that overpower my own creativity, and was so focused on the community, I forgot to work on comics. So remember what your job is. If your job is to put out a book, don't get caught up in the marketing so much that you forget to write the book. But if you're interested in seeing some of the things we do, we're always part of Baltimore Comic-Con. And this weekend, they're doing a virtual Comic-Con, and they're actually giving us our own channel. So if you go to Baltimore Comic-Con live.com/kids, or look for me on Facebook and you'll find the link. We're going to actually have some of our presentations that we do, like how to draw Max Meow, design your own superhero. And then we've even, because it's virtual, we've got interviews with people like Judd Winnick and Kazuo Kibuishi and a lot of other people. JC Phillips, who does a new book called Pacey Packer, Unicorn Tracker. And so I had to do a little marketing there, but
yeah, I should put the link to that inside of Kids Comics Unite. I don't think I have done that yet, so I absolutely got to do that.
Cool, thank you.
Well, everybody, I hope all of us go to the bookstore or go online and buy Max Meow. Somebody's already got it.
Oh boy, nice.
Yay. And John, thank you so much. Thank you. This was a wonderful interview.
Well, I'm honored to be here, and I wish everybody good luck and continued success.
And you too, Max Meow. Woohoo!
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.